Hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Ideal Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Harris, and I'm so excited that you've tuned back in for another week. Well, guess what, guys? We've got part two of this incredible conversation from last week's episode, and I don't want to delay the time any longer. Let's jump right in to keep the conversation going. I agree with you in that in many cases, the level of reverence or the level of priority that non-churched or de-churched or unchurched would put on the titles. I don't know. I would almost argue the point, though, that maybe it's not that they don't care. It's that if you're going to have the title, do the work of the title.
Would I love it. That? I agree with this so much. Is there a consistency between I'm not advocating the drinking of sugary soft drinks. I'm just making a metaphor. I don't want to open a Pepsi can and taste 7-Up. So just be who your label says you're going to be. Because I'm smart enough to, I'm smart enough to do my own research on what you should be based on your label. It's right here in my phone.
That touches on the point that I was trying to figure out how to get back there to it, because I got a page and a half of notes of things that you said, and I'm gonna have to have you back. I'm gonna have to have you back because we're not gonna be able to deal with all of it today. But one of the things that you said that I think is so relevant for us in our context, and that is younger ministers, preachers, leaders who are acting or putting on a persona that is much older than they are. And, so to your point, if you got a 20-year-old body, I shouldn't have that glass of Coke that I got to pull out of the machine.
Right. Right. And you're going to need more shorts and t-shirts than you need suits.
Woo!
You're going to need, you just are. And that is the reality of it. And that's not the dress up versus dress down argument. That is a metaphor I'm using for the work that has to be done. And you've got to remember, not only are people unchurched and de-churched, but some already have a disdain for the church. So I can't show up and justify and validate all of the stereotypes, the negative stereotypes that they already have. And those are some of the changes that I think we're going to have to make philosophically and theologically. For example, unfortunately, in the 90s, we limited blessing and favor to materialism. And the favor of God was really not the blessing of God. It was really, how far have you tapped into the American dream? So the other thing was, and I believe it, I believe the anointing, the oil starts with the head and pours down. I just wanted to give some people, I'm sitting in the pews now, y'all, so I got a different lens. And so, my people said, we want our pastor blessed, because if our pastor is blessed, then we're going to be blessed. And that's true. But now I've got to know that because of the disdain, because of some of the negative stereotypes, I've got to know not to show up in the poor neighborhood with this car and with thousands of dollars worth of clothes on, because that's not going to fly in this neighborhood because of the socioeconomic status of the neighborhood. They're not looking up to me. They're looking down on me. And so I've got to make that adjustment. I've got to make the adjustment now. If I'm going to defend the church, I've got to recognize that everybody that I'm dealing with is not literate as it relates to certain things of Scripture. So now I've got to see, how do I relate to the illiterate? For example, you mentioned, will you live up to your label, live up to your title, that type of thing. The consistency of lifestyle now is so critical, not because we're perfect, not because Scripture even expects us to be, but I'm dealing with a biblically illiterate audience who has a perspective of Christianity that says, I'm never supposed to act like that on a given day. I'm never supposed to be, as my granny used to say, devilish. I'm never supposed to be devilish because they don't understand my flesh working against my spirit. They don't understand that sometimes my flesh overcomes my spirit. They don't understand. They understand their mixed up perspective of Christianity. So in order to win them, I got to be more consistent. I've got to stay away from the scandal. I've got to do more in sanctification. Well, I'm telling a lot of my sons and daughters who are especially Pentecostal in their orientation that the world doesn't care about the manifestation of our gifts. What the world wants to see is the manifestation of the fruit. And maybe we need to concentrate on the empowerment of the Holy Spirit, shaping us to be who we couldn't be without him, rather than who prophesied, who spoke in tongues, who they don't care. They don't. And so there's a consistency. If I'm going to defend it, I've got to recognize, I got to deal with the illiterate. I can't do children's ministry. I'm not built to do it. I did youth and young adult ministry as you did. And that's, as far as the age group, that's as low as I can go. Today, I can still do youth and young adult ministry, but I can't do children because I am not gifted to take these principles and put them on the level of a 7-year-old. Why? Because when I started preaching, my dad's church in St. Louis, the average age of my dad's church was 55. I came up preaching to old people. God anointed me to be able to deal with youth and young adult. And after the anointing, I went and did the study in order to but I grew up preaching to old people. So let's transfer it to what we're talking about. You have a audience that you're trying to relate to give the gospel of Jesus to share the love of Jesus with, who already have, in many cases, an incorrect perspective of what Christianity is all about. How do I learn to relate to them? And I'm saying there's going to have to be more conversation than proclamation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So Bishop, let's do this, because you use the word disdain, and I think that's an accurate word for many people in their view of the church. And I'm trying to ask this question with the amount of time that we have left, and I want to be sensitive to your time. So people have a disdain. So let's go back to Ms. Jackson for a moment, because you had the wherewithal to recognize that for the African-American context, well, really the church in general, but specifically for the African-American context, what we're talking about today, the pastor, the reputation, the practice, the secretary, sexual behaviors, scandal, pastor, various pastors sleeping around the church or sleeping around the community. et cetera, et cetera. How do we get a handle on this? How do we, and I know that, you know, for people that are unchurched, they group all of us together. So whether you
Right.
Pentecostal or Catholic,
Right.
y'all all in the same boat, right? And so they see this on the news and all of that. How do we, I mean, other than just, I don't know, I was going to say something crazy. I'm not even going to say that. What's the solution?
I want to separate, I want to separate those who are simply wanton from those who are weak. And I want to separate those who are weak from those who are wounded. And please forgive the alliterations, but I'm a preacher. It's how I think. I wish I didn't talk this way. My son is in advertising, so he hates alliterations. It's like, Daddy, just stop it, stop. But I think that there is a sector of our community, the clergy community, who in many cases were too spiritually weak to take on the task of pastoring and preaching. Because depending on when you came up, I'll take me for example. And I was licensed and ordained by my father, who made certain assumptions about my discipleship. Nobody ever asked me if I had a prayer life. Nobody ever asked me if I had a devotional life. So we allowed people to be preachers who we're not sure if they're disciples. And so, yeah, they're saved and they've been called and they have a gift. And so you send this weak person into this environment of now, you know, a lot of us read him when we were starting out. So, you know, Warren Wiersbe said, if you want to test a man's character, don't give him responsibility, because everybody can handle responsibility. If you want to test a man's character, give him privilege, because everybody can't handle privilege. So you take these people, you take us, self included, put us in a situation of privilege and popularity, increased access, and haven't found out if we're really disciples of Jesus Christ. So some of us were too weak to be who they allowed us to be. Then weakness can really turn into wantonness. That if I feed my weakness enough, then I just become wanton and wicked. And it happens. It has happened. And you will find people who have developed such a habit of just taking what they have access to that it becomes addictive, and they can't even stop. They can't even stop. Here's the other. Some get wounded because they can't manage this situation. For example, I said this on my radio show yesterday, as a matter of fact. If you do not find a functional distraction and a functional way of decompressing and getting away from ministry, you will find a dysfunctional one. And a lot of us, it's just inevitable. If you do not learn to have a functional balance, you will end up dysfunctional, whether it is with women, whether it is with alcohol, whether it is with authority, you know. So we've got to get people to understand. And here's the final one. I know we only have a couple minutes left. The final one was, depending on when they started pastoring, because this stuff goes back all of our life and further. A lot of them, Christopher, got married in order to get a church.
Yeah.
Never wanted to be married and didn't want to be married to the person that they were married to. And here's what all of us understand. If you lead under pressure, you are going to need a place of comfort. And if that place of comfort is not home, you're going to find it. I'm not trying to give excuse for what we've done in many cases, but I do want to give some reasons that many don't talk about. I made the statement, there was a time, and I am a divorcee, and there was a time that there was a lot of divorce going on in the African American church. And everybody was, and I just asked the question, is the market correcting itself? Is this finally crashing because so many people got married for the wrong reason, weren't prepared, and it finally crashed? So sometimes we're weak, sometimes we're just wanton, but sometimes we're wounded and don't have a place of healing.
Yeah, Bishop, I think you're absolutely right. I would even argue the point that, or add to what you've said, that the whether we want to admit it or not, in the African American community, we can put pressure on each other like like words can't describe.
And social media has made it worse.
Yeah, it's only exaggerated it, right? Mm-hmm. And so to the point that you made, wounded or wanton, et cetera, I think it even speaks to some of the issues that you and I are probably experiencing in conversations with others, even about people who are pastoring now in their sexuality, and that whole discussion. And so I think, for those that are listening to this, particularly if you're listening to this, you're a pastor, you're a leader, you're an influencer in the church. I want to really highlight one thing amongst everything that Bishop just shared in this last segment that he just shared. And that is, don't make any assumptions about the discipleship of the people that you're leading.
Yes.
Just please don't. It is critical and necessary and needed for you as the leader to ensure that you have the tools and the environment set up for your people to be discipled and to be held accountable for that discipleship.
Absolutely. We can't make those assumptions. And here's the thing. There are mistakes that I never would have made in ministry. And I've been in church all my life. I've been in ministry since I was 19. So all of the mistakes I've made have been made from church. So there are mistakes that I would have never made, or there are deeds that I would have never done, because every deed is not a mistake. There are things I would have never done if the cost had been higher. And in many cases, because we don't have systems of accountability, the cost is not high enough. And what we will do is salvage the ministry, but at what cost? And if I had made the decision that I had wanted to make, then when I had marital issues, I would have given up my church to save my marriage. But the culture said I couldn't do that. The culture said there are too many people who depend on you, and God has invested too much in you, and you are too gifted, and blah, 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 blah. So the cost in many cases isn't high enough. And in many cases, we don't have a culture that sets family as a priority.
So Bishop, okay, I'm gonna have to have you back.
I'd love to share again.
I got one more. So I want to do the quick fire questions.
Okay.
To wrap out, but I got one more question that I got to deal with, because you're throwing all of this stuff out. It's incredible wisdom and incredibly transparent. And I I don't want it to be a miss on us either. For those that are listening to this, a lot of what you've heard Bishop Triplett say, I hope you're picking up his transparency, and that's not something that we want to take lightly. So thank you for that transparency. In your introduction, you said this, and I wasn't going to dig into this, but based on what you've said and the meat that you've thrown out, you are a bishop. You've been consecrated a bishop. You were leading a church. You have other pastors and leaders that look at you as a spiritual father and as an influencer. You are not, you're in demand as a preacher. You have a reputation, but you decided to walk away from the local pastorate. Okay. We got to deal with that a little bit. You got to tell us, because, and for those that are listening, that is not a small feat. Let me use a corporate example to paint the picture for those of you that are listening to this of what I'm drawing as a comparison to what Bishop Triplett did. If a CEO of a company, a publicly traded company, is in the middle of its greatest profits and greatest returns, incredible brand recognition, walking on gold, the government loves them, they have customer loyalty, et cetera, stands up in the middle of that and simply says, y'all can have it all. Thank you. I'll see you later. Yeah. Most of us would not be able to really, we would think that something else is wrong. Right. But I hear you saying nothing was wrong. I was led to say, I gotta do something else. Let's talk about it, Bishop.
Well, you're right on point, because it's interesting when we put out the press release. It was funny when we put out the press release that I was transitioning out of the pastorate of my church. I got 2 new Twitter followers immediately, and both of them were crisis PR people. They were, and because the assumption was he is not walking away and there is no crisis. And so he's going to need somebody to help him put the pieces of his life and ministry.
Bishop, hold on for just one second. Okay, no, we're still recording. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so so the thought was something else is coming out and I'm gonna get a new client. And that wasn't the case. I wish, Pastor, I could give some great grand testimony of I obeyed. I didn't want to. I wasn't burnt out. When the Lord said to me to make the change, it was a shock to me. And I'll be very honest. I didn't know it until I came out of it. I went through about an 8 or 9 month depression after it, because it's not something that I wanted to do. It is not something that I had been planning to do. It is not something that I had strategically put things in place. Now, there was a year plus time to get some things in order from my announcement to my last Sunday at Hope Fellowship, but it's not something I wanted to do. If I'm honest, I still don't like it. I still don't like it because not only, you use the publicly traded company as the example. I started it. So here's the church I started. And so, but God wanted me to do something else. And I'll be very, very honest. We're still figuring out what that is, because part of the challenge, part of the strength of our church, it was that I've always had my hands in several things, not just, community development, all those kinds of things, but church was my home base. And so there were a lot of different spokes to the wheel, but that you had that home base. Now I've got all of these spokes that are just flying around. And I don't have that particular home base. And I've had to learn to think about it differently. For anybody, I've had people come to me and say, man, that took a lot of courage. I'm like, no, it really didn't take courage. It took obedience. And here is what God said to me. And I'm not a real big, the Lord told me person, but he did say to me, you can either be comfortable in my will or comfortable out of my will or uncomfortable in my will. If you stay where you are comfortable, know that is not my will for you. And so I'm uncomfortable, but I'm in his will, and I know that. And I said to my church, I said, the only way that I can do this, they said, how can you do this? I said, the only way I can do this is the same voice that told me to start it. Is the same voice the voice that told me to make this transition. That's all I got for you. I have no other explanation. It's just the same voice.
Bishop, did you appoint a successor, or did the church go through a
I did.
search?
I did. I appointed a successor because one of the things, I lived in Daytona Beach, and one of the things that we fought, and I don't want this to open up a whole nother stream of conversation, but one of the resident spirits that we fought in that city was the whole issue of lay authority in controlling pastors and preachers. So I never wanted my church to be in a situation that we revert to the very thing that God used me to help tear down. So I appointed a successor, and Hope Fellowship, as long as I'm alive, will never be in a situation where sheep have to go find their shepherd.
I love it. I love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope y'all got lots of notes. I sure do. This has been amazing. And again, Bishop, thank you so much for your transparency, your honesty, your candor, your humor. This has been amazing.
Thank you, sir. My honor. And I've looked, at some of the other persons that you've had a part of this particular discussion, and I'm just really, really humbled and honored to be in the number. I mean that. Thank you for allowing us to share.
All right, so let's have a little fun real fast.
Okay.
We do these quick fire questions to every guest that comes on. And the goal is I get to ask a question. You have to answer it as fast as you can with the first thought that comes to mind.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
All right, Apple or PC?
Apple.
What are you not good at?
I can't fix anything.
Favorite food?
Don't have one.
Favorite movie?
Oh, don't hold it against me. Godfather 2.
Favorite TV show?
Favorite television show, Sports Center.
That is hilarious. Top 3 items on your bucket list?
Top 3 items on my bucket list. I don't have an answer. And I'll tell you why I don't have an answer. And it goes back to, I've had to survive, literally, financially, all of that, the last 3 years. And so the extra has not been on my brain. I'm just trying to get from week to week.
I got it. No, that makes sense. Last 3 books you've read?
Last 3 books I read, actually the last 3 books I've read all had to do with millennials. So I read The Coming of Age of the Trophy Kids. I read, let's see, it's right here. I read The Myth of Millennial, and a cool little book called Analog Advice in a Digital Age. And so I was preparing, and I figured out in the reading of all of the stuff on millennials, I don't like them.
You sound like Miss Jackson just there.
Right. I'm trying to work with them.
We'll come back to that some other time. All right. Outside of the Bible, what book has had the most impact on your life?
I would have to say two. One would be the J. Oswald Sanders book on leadership. I think it's called Spiritual Leadership. And then secondly, The Jewish Phenomenon. That book had a significant effect on me.
All right. How do you maintain your productivity?
How do I maintain my productivity? I'm my best critic. And so I critique myself a lot. But let me say this really, really quick. What's interesting is my productivity is down right now because I just discovered something from myself is I get energy from people. So I have an internal locus of control, but as it relates to productivity, I'm best when I'm working with teams of people. And because I'm a one-man show, I work from home, my productivity is down. So I'm actually looking for some teammates.
I love it. All right, two more questions.
Okay.
What is the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
The funniest thing that ever happened to me, this wasn't funny. It was embarrassing. In college, I competed in forensics. And so as a part of the Bradley speech team, we would judge other high school speech tournaments. I'm a judge. I did not eat properly that day. And so I grabbed, of all things, a sloppy Joe out of the cafeteria as I'm running to be the judge of a speech tournament. This nice little white high school student is up there doing her best in her oratory, and I throw up in the middle of the round. So can you imagine the judge throws up in the middle of your speech? I was outdone. The news flew throughout the whole tournament.
So I'm laughing because the fact that you grabbed a sloppy Joe from the cafeteria says it all.
Right.
From the cafeteria says it all.
Right.
That's hilarious. All right, last question. Okay. Did you win any superlatives in high school?
Did I what?
Did you win any superlatives in high school?
Most likely to succeed.
Oh, that's awesome. What's funny is, and I'm finding this to be really true, almost all of my guests have either won most likely to succeed or like the smartest in the class or something. It's crazy.
I guess you know how to pick them.
Well, listen, it's a blessing. So, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in today. I've had Bishop Derek Triplett on the Wise Idea podcast. It has been an incredible time together. Our announcer is going to come on and give you some more details, but everything you've heard today is going to be in the show notes. A lot of the book recommendations, the references, how to get a hold of Bishop Triplett will also be in our show notes. I want to personally ask you, I know our announcer is going to ask you, but I want to personally ask you, please go to iTunes, Google Play, leave a rating and a review. That's how other listeners find us. It's an incredible opportunity. We are committed and head first into providing tools and strategies for hearts to live inspired and heads to live wise. Y'all know how I end every single week. Live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes, show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewисeideapodcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.
Get understanding.